Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Nibbana paramang sukhanti. Today, this afternoon, I was talking with a couple of visitors, and they were asking me about the nature of Nibbana. And the particular visitor was from a different tradition. It wasn't the monk, it was one of the lay attendants of the Tibetan monk who came today. And again, it was quite evident to the monk who was with me and myself that a lot of people have some very strange ideas about the nature of Nibbana, and even though that some people say even talking about it is a waste of time because it's something one will have to really see for oneself, nevertheless the Lord Buddha talked about the nature of Nibbana. He made it quite clear about what that nature really is. The word has a very clear meaning in the Pali language. In Buddhism, as taught by the Buddha, there was no distinction made between ultimate truth and conventional truth. That's something which came afterwards in the commentaries. What the Buddha said was very quite clear what he meant. And so I thought today I'd talk about that, and also in order to explain that, it gives one an insight into the nature of the connected idea in Buddhism about no self, anatta, which is also, somebody asked me whether I might talk about that this evening. And those two go together very neatly, and they rest upon each other. As many of you know, the nature of Nibbana is well expressed by the Buddha as the ending of the five khandhas. There are in the suttas two types of Nibbana. There is a Nibbana which is the end of the cause for rebirth, gained at that moment of attaining the fruit of arhat. That's when the meditator, the practitioner, knows that rebirth has ended. What's done has been done. There is no more coming into any more birth. That is a knowledge which comes up when one has seen the causes which give rise to rebirth again and again and again. One has seen that craving based on ignorance, the craving which is based on the illusion of a self. When there's an illusion of me, there will always be a mine. When there's an illusion of a doer, there'll be something to do. When there's an illusion of a knower, there'll be great concern into the objects of the six senses. And that basically causes the craving to control that world. And once the person realizes that those two basic functions of the mind, knowing and doing, are just an empty process, run completely by cause and effect, even though a very complicated web of cause and effect coming from within one and from without, that thereby that one be able to see the emptiness of the process, the emptiness of a being, of a doer, of a controller, of something which receives all this information and reacts back with doing, with moving. And the seeing of that and overcoming the craving which is based upon that, once and for all, one would understand at that moment of completely ending that craving, that the arhat has been achieved, and that there can be no more rebirth. In the same way that when you've turned off the electricity, you know there can be no lights. When the roots have been uprooted from the tree, each and every root, you know that tree cannot grow again. There are certain cause and effects which one know happens. And seeing that, that's the first type of Nibbana. It's called the Nibbana of the the asavas, the taints, the Nibbana of craving. And I just pause there because this doesn't mean that the craving goes somewhere. Craving is not a being, it's not a force or an energy which is transferred into some sort of other energy. It's just something which arises and passes away again. And once it passes away at that point of arhat, it does not arise again for those 5 khandhas. And it's important just to pause at that point, to know that meaning of Nibbana. It's something which is ending. That is why that those of you who study the suttas, and especially in Pali, will know that there's other words which go alongside Nibbana. They have on the way to Nibbana, viraga, which is like the fading away of things. And it gives you an idea of what the next word is, the cessation of things. Nirodha and Nibbana is the complete disappearance of them. In the time of the Buddha, ordinary people, ordinary villagers, they wouldn't be rich, highly educated, just ordinary people, would all understand the meaning of that word. The verb was nibbuti, and the noun Nibbana. All it really meant was something stopping. The word was used especially, as many of you know, as a flame which goes out. And the Lord Buddha liked that word, as a flame goes out, because it incorporated, that image incorporates the important part of Nibbana. The flame is only there because of the cause of heat, of wax, and of wick. Or if it's an oil lamp, of oil, wick, and heat. Those 3 causes together create that flame. When one of those causes disappears, which is the wind blows away the heat, or the wick runs out, or the oil runs out, either of those 3 causes is enough for the flame to disappear. And that's the flame as Nibbana. It's niroded, it's ceased. And of course it makes it very clear from that context to what this really means for Nibbana of craving, Nibbana of the asavas, Nibbana of upadana, of this taking up of things, what most people call grasping or attachment. I can see that this is just the ending of those things. Just like the flame had its causes, so these things had their causes. The causes have been overcome, and the things are no more. That's the nature of this Nibbana business. And to actually understand that and see that these are things which can never arise again, it answers very quickly the question whether an arhat can actually regress and not be an arhat later on. Once these things of Nibbana is by its very nature irreversible. Once the thing has disappeared, it's completely gone. And you can see that process of going, viraga, fading away, nirodha, ceasing, and that's it, ceasing forever, Nibbana. And that's the first Nibbana of the causes for rebirth. And then you have those years the arhat lives in this world as the greatest blessing for all humanity until the time when the 5 khandhas eventually completely fade and disappear at what's called Parinirvana. And I don't want to make this talk into a Pali lesson, but Pari means fully, completely, all around, in every which way. And this means like the complete Nibbana of things. The first Nibbana is called Nibbana with something remaining. The second Nibbana is Nibbana with nothing remaining. The Parinirvana. Anavasesa Nibbana. And so as such, just to contemplate those 2 words, the arhat, having got that attainment, it's the causes of Nibbana, but still the 5 khandhas still continuing. But whence is that full Nibbana, Parinirvana, the final passing away of the arhat, complete? That's without any remainder. Without any remainder means there's no sort of consciousness or drop which merges into an ocean somewhere. There's nothing remaining. Gone, completely vanished. And it's that beautiful time in between where the arhat can truly serve the world. Someone who has fully abandoned craving, who will never again act from a sense of me and mine, who not only knows the Dhamma, but who actually lives and talks the Dhamma in every moment of their life. These are the somebody who has a great power to teach others, to inspire others, and show them the way. A stream winner who's also seen the Dhamma but has not made that the fully guiding principle of their life is someone who can teach but sometimes does not inspire. And so the arhat is the greatest of all teachers, the greatest of all benefits for the world. And in those years when they teach, they give so much to the sasana. An arhat teaching just for a year gives so much more than a stream winner teaching for many years, which gives immensely more than a puthujjana teaching for eons, not really understanding what they're teaching. And so understanding that, you realize the best thing one can do for all the world, for all humanity, is to really understand these teachings, to realize these teachings, and to bring these teachings so closely in to the way that one works, that one is these teachings, one is an arhat. The Parinirvana, when everything is let go of, finished. People often say that that's a nihilistic idea of Nibbana. But it only is a nihilistic idea for those people who still haven't fully understood and penetrated the fact that there's nothing here anyway. Nihilism means that something is destroyed. It's called the Uchedawada wrong view in Buddhism. Uchedawada means like the destruction of something. It is the idea, the dichotomy between a self, a soul, continuing on and on and on forever and ever and ever, eventually continuing on in some sort of heaven world where there's only happiness forever and ever in a refined state, in a subtle state or whatever. That's the Sasatawada, which goes on forever and ever and ever. It's the idea of heaven in its different forms. In the ordinary common form of religions like Christianity, of somebody dying and going to a happy place where they can listen to Elvis Presley music if that's what they like, where they can eat fish and chips and mushy peas if that's what they like, forever and ever and ever without stop. The sensuous type of heavens, which most people realize is quite fatuous, naive, and completely inappropriate, impossible, and just pure wishful thinking. However, the more refined religious people, philosophers, start to contemplate a more refined type of heaven, of all the grosser forms of the self disappearing, and having very fine consciousnesses, cosmic consciousnesses, or merging into a universal consciousness. But that too is, when examined closely, is illogical, irrational, cannot hold. Consciousness has to be conscious of something. Consciousness is not something which can exist without its object. You cannot see without something to see. You cannot see in a dark room. You cannot hear in silence. You cannot feel when you have no body to feel. You need the objects of consciousness. That's why the Buddha would always say that consciousness depends on its objects, nama rupa. Its objects depend upon consciousness to have a meaning. Those two go together. And understanding that, one realizes there cannot be consciousness without its objects. And those objects have to be changing, because anyone knows, who has an inkling of any psychology, that if you keep watching the same object unchanging, then the mind turns off. Consciousness is vijnana. Vi means like to bifurcate, divide. It's the consciousness, the knowing, the jnana of duality. You can't be conscious of light if there's no darkness. And so understanding that cannot be a single object of consciousness unchanging for eternity, just consciousness will just die. But understand that any heaven realm of cosmic consciousness has to be aware of some duality, has to be aware of change, and with that change will always be suffering. It's impossible. The only possibility is the ending of this consciousness, and the Buddha made it very clear in so many suttas. In fact, the first time he made this clear was in the second sutta, the Anattalakkana Sutta, told to his first 5 disciples, and it was that sutta which made those 5 disciples fully enlightened. The Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first sermon, taught to teach them the 4 Noble Truths, got them to stream winning, or at least Anya Kondanya to stream winning. But the one which really turned them into arhats was the Anattalakkana Sutta, where it was teaching about these 5 khandhas. Now, it doesn't really matter whether you want to sort of postulate something outside of these khandhas or not. You just don't really need to even bother with that. Just the 5 khandhas by themselves, the way they're described. If there is something outside these 5 khandhas, so what? It doesn't really matter, because these 5 khandhas include such things as consciousness and perception. And the Buddha made clear in the Anattalakkana Sutta that perception, consciousness, is not only anicca, impermanent, but it is dukkha. No matter what type of consciousness, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, in other words, hearing consciousness, smelling consciousness, taste consciousness, even body consciousness, and mind consciousness, that each of those consciousnesses, far and near, gross or subtle, refined or unrefined, cosmic or just ordinary, all consciousness, the Buddha said, all perception is dukkha, is suffering, is not me, not mine, not a self. Seeing that very clearly, you can imagine the effect it would have on those first 5 ascetics. With that very powerful statement, the Lord Buddha was taking out, saying very clearly and positively that consciousness and perception were not to be cherished, that in all and whatever form you can imagine them as, there's always dukkha. And where there's consciousness, where there's perception, there will be suffering. And also saying that these don't belong to us anyway. It gave the monks at that time the knowledge that that which they took to be a self was the illusion. And seeing that which they took to be a self as an illusion, as empty of any truth, they realized that their taking up of that, their grasping of that as a reality, was a mistake. They saw the process of the 5 khandhas, the process of this mind and body, this process of that which you take to be you, is just an empty process. A process which is empty of a self, empty of a core, empty of a controller, empty of a knower. And seeing that, the whole idea of a consciousness, a soul, a cosmic consciousness, a God, or whatever the people would ever postulate, you could see in that moment of truth that all of those ideas for which people run around the world is completely hollow, empty, cannot be sustained. Not only does one see in those experiences the complete fallacy of a God or Supreme Being, one also sees the complete fallacy of the idea of a self or a soul. You see this for yourself as an insight, not as a theory. And you understand then why Nibbana is not an annihilation of anything. How can there be an annihilation of something which never was? Once there was a monk, who was just trying to remember his name now, who was asking, I think Venerable Sariputta, what happens to the Buddha after he passes away? Does he go to some other state or some sort of in-between state of neither being nor not being? And Venerable Sariputta told this monk, Yamaka, he said, you cannot sort of say that, because you cannot say there's a Buddha even now when he's still alive. When you look at that person who's a Buddha, what is a Buddha? Is it that monk sitting there? Is it his great wisdom? Is it the great words and psychic powers and charisma or whatever else? What do you take to be the Buddha? And whatever you take to be the Buddha, this is for one who was actually living at the same time, in the same place as the Buddha. Looking at all of that, you can see that's just something which arises and passes away. It's not the essential Buddha. As you go deeper and deeper, the 5 khandhas of that person, which people call the Buddha, were just like any other 5 khandhas, rising and passing away. Only that particular process had come to its end, was about to completely disappear, to Parinirvana. That's why Sariputta said you can't even see a Buddha here. What you're just seeing is the body. That's not the Buddha. All you're seeing is Vedana, the response of pleasure and pain to the sensory contact with the world. That's not the Buddha. That comes and goes. All you're seeing is perception arise and pass away. All you're seeing is the mental formations such as will, the doer, arise and pass away. There's nothing in there doing the doing. There's no sort of deep Buddha at the controls. And this consciousness which you think is a Buddha, that too is nothing, it's empty. The Buddha called consciousness the magician's trick, maya, illusion, deceit. Because this consciousness, it's a conjure which gives you the idea that there's somebody inside knowing, there's somebody inside hearing, there's somebody inside thinking and reflecting on those thoughts. That's a trick of a conjurer, the one who can create illusions and trick the audience. And you're being tricked. That's the illusion. If I can see that there's no rabbit coming out of the hat, it's all done with the mirrors of cause and effect. You no longer believe in that illusionist, the consciousness. You see it's empty, completely empty, nothing there. And you know why Sariputta said to Venerable Yamaka, but there's nothing there now. So how can you say that nothing there now is going to go here, go there, or not be here, or not be there? How can nothing go anywhere? How can nothing be reborn? How can nothing not be reborn? How can nothing be reborn and not reborn? How can nothing neither not be reborn nor not be reborn? It was just nothing, just an empty process. So that was Venerable Sariputta's answer. However, this is challenging to many people. And one of the biggest challenges with understanding the complete emptiness of these 5 khandhas right now is that we always want somewhere where we can latch or hold on to as a place where I am. It is called in Pali bhava danha, the craving to be, the craving to exist. It is one of the strongest forces of craving which create rebirth and consequent suffering in the world. The craving to be. And this is the problem, that craving to be is so strong that it bends the truth like all cravings do, to show you not what is true but what you want to see. You really want to see that rabbit coming out of the conjurer's hat, that that's actually what you see. It's an illusion, it's a deceit. You so want to have a self, have a me, that that's what you see. But when the Buddha was asking monks to really look carefully, to see what it is that you take to be this self, what it is that you take to be me. And looking very deeply, you can notice the two last resorts of the self, the doer and the knower. You really think that you are the one who decided to come here tonight. You're the one who decided to sit in this way. You're the one who decided not to leave. You're the one who decides to scratch your ear or whatever else you do. You are not in control. There is no doer inside. That which you take to be the will you can see as the causal process. And there's been many talks which I've given to giving evidence, stirring evidence, because it stirs up the reliance on that illusion. It's shocking to realize that one is not in control. For the whole life we feel that we're going to get safety and security if we're in control. That's why in Western world the freedom is the ability to control. That is a joke. There is no such freedom. That which we call will is completely caused, manipulated by our culture, by behaviorism, by the advertisements on television, by interaction with our peers, by what we read, by what we listen to. That's why people who stay here too long will have no choice. That you will have to get jhanas, you will have to get enlightened. And those of you lay people who come and listen here, as well as the monks, be careful. If you come here too often, you will leave your husband, you will leave your wife, and you will become monks and nuns. And you will give up all your possessions, and all your children, and you will devote your time to that which is the only reasonable thing in life, letting go, renouncing. So even though I allow some lay people to come here, I give you that warning. Don't say I did not warn you. Because this is the only possibility. When you hear teachings about Nibbana and non-self, it challenges very deeply into the very heart of that which you call life, the doer and the knower. When one sees that completely, the doer is part of the fourth khandha, mental formations. The Buddha described that like the plantain tree, or like the onion. Peel it away, there's nothing pithy in there. Those different layers of the onion, the different causes, why you decided to do this, where this will, this doing all came from. And you find it's completely empty of a pith inside. There's no person or being who's actually doing anything. To contemplate that, to get to the heart of that, even imagine it's true if you can't actually see it, has profound influences over your destiny, or rather the destiny of the five khandhas. When there's no doer inside, wherefore can craving come from? Because of mine. Because we think that we own things, therefore we think we can do. Therefore we think we can control. Therefore we think we can own. As I've often said to people as a very beautiful way of deepening your meditation, say, I don't own anything. I don't own anything. My body is not mine. I do not own it. I do not own my monastery. This is not mine. It is just a monastery. I don't own my Vedana, my feelings, pleasure and pain. They come and go all by themselves. They're not mine. I might as well argue about night and day. Please, night, don't stop. I want to go on for a long time. Please, day, last much longer. You can't argue with nature like that. Vedana is just like night and day. It comes and goes all by itself. Now pleasure, now pain. Haven't you learned by now that you cannot control that pleasure? Haven't you known by now that pain always ends eventually and gets pleasure again? And how often do you waste so much time trying to control the pleasure and pain in your life? Getting upset and moody when you feel pain, disappointment, aches, headaches, earaches, not hearing what you want to hear. You haven't got any choice. This is just the way this world works. If you've got an ear, you're going to hear many things you hate and you don't like, which upset you. That's the nature of having an ear. If you don't like blame and criticism, cut off your ears. Drive them out. Beauty and ugliness. If you don't want to have beauty and ugliness, nice things to see, rotten things to see, just cut out your ears, your eyes. If you don't want to smell rotten smells like people passing wind, cut off your nose. If you don't want to taste rotten food or things which are really disgusting, cut out your tongue. If you don't want to feel pain in the body, cut out this body. Don't get another body again. If you don't want to feel disappointment in the mind, don't have any more minds. No more mental consciousness. That is the only way, because Vedana is like that. That's his nature. Perceptions. How often from perceptions does it cause us pain? What do you mean by that? How much does all this doing create this great responsibility and the stress which comes from this? The people who have more power have more stress. They think they're doing things. They take responsibility for what they do, and they suffer accordingly, because there's always things go wrong. The more responsibility, the more things go wrong. That's just the nature. Every premier eventually gets voted out. Every president eventually has to leave. Every CEO eventually gets the sack. This is just a way of things. Power, doing, eventually, we can't keep ourselves safe. We can't even keep our body going. So how can we really think we've got control over all of this? And seeing that mental formations, there's no one in there, it's not mine. Just ideas come, ideas go. Doing comes, doing stops. And there's too much doing, as we try and stop as much as we can. Consciousness turns on, consciousness turns off. Now I'm seeing something, now I'm hearing something, now I'm knowing something in the mind. It's just the play of nature of samsara, just like the wind coming and going. But understanding this is the emptiness there, there's the nature, nothingness in the nature. It's not mine, it's not me. Therefore we can understand that what we took to be a self is this process. You can see all the causes. It's nice to look at the reason why you do things. A lot of people who are monks here, why are you a monk in this monastery? So often you look at past lives. Because I was a monk in my past life. Because for many Westerners, there's no other reasons why, you became a monk and all your other relations. Certainly in my own life, I knew nobody who was a Buddhist. Why on earth I became a Buddhist? You cannot find any rational reason why I became a Buddhist if you look at my early life. It has to be something beyond that from previous life. This is process. I can see all the causes, why I went to Thailand, why I went to see Ajahn Brahm, why I became a monk, why I was interested in meditation, why I did this, why I did that, why I'm now building monasteries. See all those causes. I've got no choice in this. I have to go to India next week. It's not my decision. And so when you see just the emptiness of all this doing, the emptiness of consciousness, then you can understand that Nibbana is just this whole empty process, having been seen for what it is as empty. You've got no vested interest in keeping it going any longer. The only time a person has an interest in keeping this thing going any longer is when you think there's something valuable in here to keep going. When you think there's a me, a self, some core, some little diamond in the middle of all this muck, which you think is worth protecting, which you think can be protected and preserved. And you look deeper and deeper and deeper. When you look to the very heart, you find that all that which you thought was worth preserving, which you thought was me and mine, your most valuable possessions, I'm really talking about your most valuable possessions, not your house, your car, not your robe or your watch or whatever else is your valuable possession in your kuti for you monks. Not even your body, which is a valuable possession for most. Even your mind, all your thoughts is something more valuable than the thoughts. The thinker, even that thinker, this great jewel which you carry around with you and you cherish, that thinker is not yours. It's empty. There's nobody there. Even that is a diamond which is seen to be fake. The knower is again just made out of paste. Not real. It's the work of a clever conjurer. When you see all of this, you've got no vested interest in keeping this whole process going any longer. Why should you keep it going? There's nothing in there. The whole process self-destructs. Seeing the emptiness of that process is called stream winning. Seeing the Dhamma, one who sees the Dhamma sees dependent origination, sees causality, sees the emptiness of that world. One who sees dependent origination sees the Dhamma. Powerful teaching of the Buddha. One who sees dependent origination sees the Dhamma. One who sees the Dhamma as a stream winner. What do you mean by one who sees dependent origination? So many monks can chant that backwards and forwards in Pali, translated into Thai and even translated into English as well. And they know the 24 causes connecting each of those factors from the Abhidhamma. They still haven't seen dependent origination. The whole purpose of dependent origination is to show the emptiness of the doer, the emptiness of a knower. Vijnana is caused by sankharas based on avijja. The sankharas, the doer, the will, part of the sankharas, a major part, is caused by avijja. You look at those sankharas in greater detail. Craving, which is based on ignorance. You see how the whole process is just causality, and beautifully described by the Buddha in dependent origination. When this is, that comes into being. When this stops, all that stops. Ceases, finishes. And apply to these 5 khandhas. Okay, suppose there is something beyond these 5 khandhas. If it's beyond these 5 khandhas, it's not consciousness, it's not will, it's not thoughts, it's not perception, it's no feeling there at all, it's no material things. Basically, it can be nothing at all. So if people actually try and think what it's like to be Nibbana and something beyond the 5 khandhas, you cannot be conscious. There's no consciousness beyond the 5 khandhas, because consciousness is within the 5 khandhas. There can be no will, because will is within the 5 khandhas. There can be no Veda, no pleasure, because pleasure is within the 5 khandhas. This is why it's just all ceasing, ending. And by seeing anatta, seeing the complete emptiness of this whole process, and understanding what the Buddha was saying to those 5 ascetics, when in that beautiful Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, just going backwards and forwards in whichever way, closing up every loophole. So even the most nitpicking philosophers and thinkers could not find any possible way of seeing a self, a me, a mine, and see only this, the consequence that this is all empty of a me, a mine, a self. And seeing that, they could actually let go. Or rather, they didn't let go, just letting go happened. As a result of seeing emptiness, craving stops. Wherefore craving when there's no one doing the craving, when there's no person to receive the results of craving? That success or failure is just objects of consciousness, that's all. To be is only to create more consciousness, not mine, nothing to do with me. Wherefore craving, where there's no self? Seeing that all craving ends, all uptaking of things ends, all attachments end. As I've said here before, and it's a very good simile. I don't know where I got it from, it must have been somewhere else, maybe previous lives. The only way to stop picking up things with your hand is not to try and discipline the hand. That's impossible. You cannot will yourself to stop picking things up, because that's the very nature of the hand to do that. The only way to stop picking things up is to cut off the hand. The only way to stop craving is to cut off that which causes the craving, the illusion of self, the idea of me, the perception of mine. Once that's got rid of, craving stops. When craving stops, it's completely uprooted because of seeing the emptiness of a self. You're cutting off the core of this, the source of this craving, the source of this dukkha. You're going right to the central illusion which keeps people unenlightened and makes them suffer. And you get to that central core and cut it off. Then craving just is released. Like that simile I gave of like a bird flies out from the tree, but there's no place it could ever come back to roost. There's no land for that bird. It flies until it dies. Craving just flies off, not having any fuel, any source, any place it can rest and regain its energies. Craving just wears itself out, fades, viraga, ceases, nirodha, and completely disappears, Nibbanas. That's the experience of arhat, the Nibbanaing of craving. That's what an arhat is. They even asked me today, is it possible these days to be an arhat? Of course it's possible to be an arhat these days. There is a cause and effect relationship. That cause and effect relationship is as possible today as it was in the time of the Buddha, as it will always be. That cause is there. The effect will happen. Look at what you take to be yourself and me. See deeply into it, with courage, with guts. Go for truth, with no vested interest in what you'll find. Be prepared to die. Be prepared for your idea of self to stop. Be prepared to Nibbana, if that's what really is truth. If you can actually have that degree of courage, and then you've got a good chance of actually seeing this. You've got a good chance of actually seeing the emptiness and allowing the cause of craving to be uprooted once and for all and have craving stop. That's the arhat experience. Once the arhats had that experience, they'll always be relating to the world from that experience, serving the world, being the greatest blessing to the world, as they're getting other people out of this stupidity of self, giving them that freedom. Nibbana paramang sukhang. Nibbana being the highest happiness. And at the end of their time, the end of their life, the end of their passage of 5 khandhas, when the body, the last feeling, Vedana, the last perception, the last mental formation, the last moment of consciousness arises, when it passes away, because of the absence of craving, because of the absence of the idea of me, mine, a self. There is no cause, no reason, no force for another moment of consciousness ever to arise. The flame has been blown out. The flame will never arise again. Completely Parinirvana. Nothing has been annihilated. There was nothing there in the beginning, nor in the middle, nor in the end, nor after the end. There's nothing going to nothing. That's all. The arhat bhikkhuni, Kisa Gotami, who many people know from the story of her child and the mustard seed. She was sitting in the vihara one day. She was meditating on a flame. A gust of wind came and blew out that flame. That was the trigger for her enlightenment when she became an arhat bhikkhuni. I hope you can understand from the simile which I've given this evening how and why she became an arhat. Looking at a flame, seeing it go out. Not go out the door, but just disappear. And why? Because of the causes. In this particular case, heat had been taken away by the wind. One cause had gone, and the whole flame had disappeared. The heat of craving, the heat of desire, the heat of grasping, when that's taken away, the flame goes out. She saw the insubstantiality of these 5 khandhas. She saw it first of all in this child. The death of someone so close to you starts to really make you wonder about who's in here and why this happens. And seeing that flame go out, just like a child go out. Seeing that the child was just causes, and that's why that child's life ended. Seeing the body and the mind as being a bundle of causes. When you become an arhat, when you die, you don't take your body or your house or your cars with you. When you Parinirvana, you don't even take your mind with you. Nothing goes. Nothing stays. Nothing was. Understanding these things from this way will give you the direction of this whole path of practice. And it will illuminate what we're supposed to be doing. We illuminate the path of letting go. Because this whole path of letting go is going closer and closer to this vanishing. Another term for Nibbana is Sabba Sankhara Samatha. The samatha-ing of all formations. All formations means all bodies, all vedanas, pleasures and pains. All perceptions, thoughts and will, all consciousnesses as well, just calming them down until they disappear. The word samatha is just what you do to get nirodha. It's how you get cessation. It's just a path of letting go, calming down until things disappear. They have the word used in the Vinaya, and I like looking at the Vinaya Pitaka and the Pali there, because there you find the Pali terms used in ordinary senses, which become very clear, because they're not philosophical or metaphysical, but they're down to earth. They have the last 7 procedures in the Patimokkha are the Adhikarana Samatha. Adhikarana means business of the Sangha. Samatha is settling that business, dealing with it, basically getting rid of that business. Whether it's an argument or a discussion about what's the Dhamma, what's the Vinaya, or whether a monk has committed an offence or not committed offence, and so on. This is how we deal with that, how we samatha it, how we bring a problem, deal with it, and so there's no problem anymore. We're samatha-ing the problem. Where does the problem go once it's dealt with? Does it go to the east or the west, or does it merge like a drop of problems with the great cosmic problem? Just how stupid that idea is. When problems are finished, they're just problems, they're finished, that's all. They're samatha, they're nirodha, they're